$500 million. That's the price that was paid for a software company called Levelset, a company built around one brutal truth about the construction industry.
At its core, what Levelset is we looked at this problem, which is that it took too damn long to get paid in construction, right? And it's too stressful. And basically wherever you looked across the construction chain, suppliers, subcontractors, general contractors, owners, they all had stress around cash and cash flow and payment.
Let's rewind for a moment. Scott Wolfe grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. His parents ran a chain of grocery stores in New Orleans, and nobody in his family had even been to college. And because of this, Scott got first row seats to watching his parents solve problems every single day in their business. And by high school, he'd carved out a niche as the family's tech guy. He was programming checkout systems for the stores. On the side, he and a friend were also building websites for fun, blogs, fan sites, and other little software projects. And this was in the late 90s, early 2000s, when the web was brand new. Yet Scott was already building on it. Now, while most kids his age were still figuring out what they wanted to do with their lives, Scott was being pulled in a completely different direction. Law school. Scott attended law school partly because his parents' business needed someone who understood the legal side and nobody else in the family could do it. So by the time he was 24 years old, Scott had something most people his age didn't. He had deep experience across multiple disciplines: software, retail, law, and entrepreneurship. But at that point, it was just Scott's life. He wasn't building towards some master plan. He was just doing the work until August 2005, when Hurricane Katrina hit and everything changed.
On August 28th, 2005, construction was nowhere in my life. And then on August 30th, 2005, construction was everywhere in my life.
The city was in pieces. I mean, every street had crews out doing restoration work, and Scott, with his brand new law license, chose to open a law firm right in the middle of all the chaos, focused on construction and property law. And almost immediately, he started seeing the same thing walk through his door. Contractor after contractor, same old story. They'd done the work, the building standing, but the money? Nowhere. Insurance companies dragging their feet, invoices sitting in someone else's inbox collecting dust, and the legal options to chase it up? Slow, expensive, and honestly, built for people who already had money. Now here's something most people outside of construction don't realize, but I'm sure have heard stories of. Getting paid in this industry is an absolute nightmare. You do the work, you send the invoice, and then you wait, and wait, and wait. And sometimes you just don't get paid. However, there are legal protections to help prevent this. But here's the thing, those protections come with mountains and mountains of paperwork, tight deadlines, and rules that change from state to state. So you've got a plumber in Louisiana playing by completely different rules to the one in Texas. Most contractors had no idea how to navigate it. They'd either hire an expensive lawyer, or more often than not, they'd just eat the loss and move on. Scott was seeing this every single day, and it started to gnaw at him, so he began building a simple tool to help.
A very caveman version of the beginning of the company.
That's it, a basic tool that helped contractors file the right legal paperwork to protect their right to get paid. Nothing flashy, nothing revolutionary, just useful. And he ran it on the side along 5 or 6 other projects for 2 to 3 years. And although he wasn't paying that much attention to it, it was quietly growing on its own. A couple $100,000 in revenue just ticking away in the background. Until one night, while he was out with his wife, this happened.
And it was my wife and I were sitting in a restaurant having dinner one day. And my phone kept dinging because I kept like user activity and purchase notifications on my phone. And it was then I was like, man, something's going on over here. And I can't, it isn't like I'm selling my time. I'm not selling hours. I'm not doing projects for money. Here's just this money and this activity that's just coming to me while I'm at dinner. And that was sort of I remember that distinctly.
That was the night everything clicked. Scott went home and started cutting ties with everything else, and from that point, Levelset had his full attention. Now, here's what's fascinating about how Levelset actually grew. They didn't raise a single penny of outside money until 2015. For 3 years, Scott bootstrapped the company to about $2 million in revenue, profitable, growing, and with a small team who deeply understood the problem they were solving. And the way they got customers, it wasn't cold calls, it wasn't trade shows, it was something that sounds so simple that perhaps it shouldn't work. Remember, Scott had been blogging since he was about 16. He was one of the first legal bloggers on the entire internet. So early, in fact, his earliest employer banned him from blogging, and so he left. And when the government tried to stop lawyers from blogging, he actually sued the state to protect their right to do it. That's how baked content was into his DNA. So when he built Levelset, the very first thing he did was sit down and read the payment protection laws in every single state, summarize them in plain English, and publish them online for free. Levelset basically started as a blog that became a product, not the other way around. Think of it like this. You've got a splitting headache, so you search your symptoms online and land on one of those websites that tells you exactly what's going on and what to do about it. That's what Levelset did, but for anyone in construction with a payment problem. And the philosophy behind it wasn't about chasing leads or running ads. It was much simpler than that.
And so built into everything we did was we wanted to help. And we felt like if we just help people with this problem, they have tons of cash stress, tons of payment stress, and when they come to our site, they're in pain. They have a headache, they have a stomach ache, they have eye problems, they have all these they have all these health problems. And we want to help and just like swaddle them with information and tools to help them. And then after that, that's when we were interested in getting them to kind of proceed down the funnel.
Help first, sell second, and it worked. By the time his eventual acquirer Procore came knocking, Levelset had over 750,000 visitors a month landing on their site. That led to thousands and thousands of leads pouring in each month, and they were never ever short of people wanting to use the product, all because Scott gave away his knowledge for free before he ever asked anyone for a sale. Now, the year is 2015. Levelset is profitable, growing, and Scott's got 3 offers for Levelset sitting on his desk. The first is from a venture capital firm called Brick and Mortar Ventures, and it was the lowest valuation of the 3. The second is from a local investor in New Orleans, better number. And the third, an outright acquisition offer, $15 million cash. And at this point, Scott owned almost the entire company. Now, most people in that situation, they take the money. 15 million, you own the whole thing, you're 30 years old. That is absolutely life-changing. But Scott could feel something bigger underneath it all. He spent 3 years living inside this problem. He understood the opportunity better than anyone, and he genuinely believed the category was about to explode. So he turned down the $15 million and took the lowest valuation term sheet on the table. Why? Because he didn't want the best price. He wanted the best partner. And that wasn't a gut feeling. It was something that Scott had been working on deliberately for years.
I had a folder on my computer from very, very early days called Investor Relations. And I would, for prospective investors and existing investors, I coddled those relationships and worked on those relationships for some percentage of time for an extended period. And I got to know the investors that I would be putting on my cap table and be putting on my board.
He'd been talking to Brick and Mortar Ventures for 16 months before they invested. His next investor had been in conversation for 2 to 3 years. The one after that had actually said no the first time around. Scott built those relationships slowly, deliberately, and over many years. And when things got tough, as they always do, those relationships held. From there, Levelset raised 5 million, then 10, then 30. The rocket was well and truly lit. It's now 2021 and Procore, the acquirer, had just gone public. They had serious capital and a clear target, construction payments. and they wanted Levelset. But Scott, he wasn't interested, and honestly, why would he be? Everything was working. Traffic was surging, their data was getting more powerful by the day, they were putting together a new funding round, the whole machine was humming. So when Procore came knocking, Scott said no. They came back, he said no again. They even came back a third time, but Procore kept raising the stakes, and Scott started facing a question that every founder dreads. Not, can I build this? He knew he could, of course. The question was, should I keep going when there's this much money on the table for everyone who helped me get there?
The team that we had working at Levelset had been working there for some of them 8 to 10 years. And it's like, are we ready to sign up for, if we say no to Procore, then we're saying yes to a 4 to 6 year push that has to go right every step of the way. And if anything goes wrong, if the market changes a little bit, which I was pretty sure they were going to change for some degree, then we're at least 2 to 3 years out before we even get back to where we are.
Now there was something else weighing on him. The deal wasn't just $500 million in cash. There was $20 million already sitting in the bank. And on top of that, the $75 million stock package that went directly to the team, not the investors, the team. Scott looked at what that actually meant on a spreadsheet. Real, life-changing money flowing into the hands of people who'd been building this thing alongside him for nearly a decade. So saying no started to feel less like ambition and more like selfishness. And that's when Scott used a phrase that I think perfectly captures what it feels like to be sitting in that chair.
One thing I was aware of, sitting there in the chair, deciding whether to sell or to go a different direction, is that whichever direction I chose, there were wolves in the forest that I didn't know of.
In the end, Procore didn't just outbid everyone, they outconvinced him. They showed up with a genuine vision for the construction payment space that actually aligned with what Scott had been trying to build. They had the reach, the capital, the customer base, and Scott ultimately made a call that very few founders had the honesty to articulate this clearly.
Procore convinced me, at a basic level, Procore convinced me that they were really motivated to go into the space. And they convinced me, to get back to what I said earlier, that this was the best way to capitalize Levelset and that vision that I had for the category. I think that's what it boils down to with respect to like why I wound up selling, is that they came so motivated and their terms started to get so good. The market was so high at that point. So from a practical standpoint, I knew about like these market conditions and thinking, man, these are going to got more and more difficult to practically turn them down.
$500 million plus stock, plus $20 million in the bank. Levelset was sold, and Scott was refreshingly honest about the alternative. He said those stories you hear about founders who turn down massive offers and go on to build something 10 times bigger, those are outlier stories. And if he's being real, there's something a bit self-serving about choosing that path.
But at the end of the day, it probably comes down to me and like, no, let's keep the Scott show rolling.
What I love about Scott's story isn't that the exit isn't the lesson. The lesson is in how he built it. He spent 3 years growing Levelset without a cent of outside money because he wanted to deeply understand the problem before he ever tried to scale it. When he did take investment, he took the lowest valuation on the table because he wanted the right partners, not the biggest check. He built a content machine that drew 750,000 visitors every single month, not through ads or gimmicks, but by genuinely trying to help people with a problem that was eating them alive. And when the moment finally came to sell, he didn't think about himself. He thought about the people who'd been in the trenches with him for over a decade. And when I asked Scott what advice he gives to founders about building a company that's actually worth acquiring, he didn't give me a playbook. He didn't give me a framework. He just gave me a principle.
Go have your point of view, run your race, build value, wake up every morning and think about how you can build more value, focus on the ground ahead, and the exit will come. And if it doesn't come, then you didn't build the value. It's like people want valuable things. Companies want valuable things. And if you stick to that kind of mindset, then you're going to serve all masters.
Scott Wolfe didn't build Levelset to sell it. He built it because contractors were getting screwed out of money they'd earned, and nobody was doing anything about it. The $500 million, that was just what happened when someone built something genuinely valuable. If you want to hear the full conversation with Scott, the link is in the description. And if this story hit home, subscribe because we've got a lot more like it coming. I'll see you in the next one.